Please help me welcome Reshma Singh.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Reshma Singh. I grew up in India and studied architecture, and I had a passion for innovative housing. When I was still a student in architecture school, one semester I decided to go and stay with a family of potters who had migrated from Rajasthan to the slums of Delhi. I got pretty bad jaundice, but what I also did was create a lifetime of memories. Together, on the potter's wheel, we fashioned and designed a whole new vocabulary of housing born out of the potter's wheel. We made mud pots into walls. We turned them at a right angle to create little niches into which you could place a few clothes. We made hollowed clay tubes, which would be ventilators for the walls, and we sliced them into half so that would act as roofing tiles. For me at that time, it was really architecture with a capital A. How can you create something out of dirt and straw and just a magic from a potter's wheel? I was 18, I felt like I could soar. I could feel that we could change the world at that time, one dream house at a time. Fast forward 20 years later. Today I'm in the Bay Area, I have a lovely family. I have a job at a science lab. We do green energy technologies for buildings. 2 years ago, something very special happened in my life. I met my mentor, Ashok Gadkar. And what he did was, he told me that since he had just finished creating the Darfur stove, which has impacted the lives of many thousands of women in Sudan, let's create a team that can take deep science and technology from the lab and take it to places where it's needed the most. So we created a team which would help to make, discover, to develop, and deploy science technologies to the developing world. This project has actually changed my life. Today, I'm so excited to share with you this journey of mine, which I call From Lab to Jab. It's a journey of health, it's a journey of design, it's a journey of technology, it's a journey of science. It's helped me to really draw deeply into who I am, into all my learning, and try and share it. Let's fast forward a little bit into the future and think of what this means. The world's first portable solar-powered refrigerator. And just think about that for a minute and put it at the back of your minds. Now let's go back to the 1950s. The FBI had just put out the most immensely watched, most wanted fugitives list. Aren't they good looking? But they were a real threat to society. Within a year, public tip-offs actually helped the police apprehend 3 of these criminals, and they were nabbed. So the FBI had put out this real clear message: mount your defenses and take action now. Look at this lovely list of pretties. Health's most wanted. These are actually human beings' most feared pathogens. These are the ones that cause things like tuberculosis, polio, pertussis, measles. These are the ones which make you want to mount your defenses and take action now. For many of us, the action is simple. We can actually take our little ones to the doctor or to the vet, get them immunized every few months, and by the time that they're 5, we are pretty okay with the fact that they're okay on their journey in health. You know, they're not going to be having any communicable diseases, or at least any serious ones in their lifetime. However, this is pretty recent. Just a few decades ago, my very dear uncle, he's actually the son of a physician, he got diagnosed with polio. He started to walk with a stick, and even to date, he drives around a handicapped car. I'm sure there are many members in the audience today, many of you folks who have relatives or friends or even parents who've had some kind of communicable disease. Anybody? So this is a pretty recent happening. But this change started in the 1940s and 50s when there was a huge era of technological advancement. As you know, this was a time, Empire State Building, architecture, great. Disneyland, Laika the dog goes into space. Lego toys are invented which changed the lives of children forever. But there was something else which also changed the lives of children forever. Remember the 1940s and 50s, the biggest terror to American society was not just atomic bombs, but polio. Every summer brought with it a threat, a terror. There were epidemics all over the US of not just polio, but also pertussis and measles. Thousands were being killed or maimed. In fact, US President Roosevelt was one of the most well-known victims of polio, and he was the one who started the March of Dimes Foundation to start funding polio vaccines. It was only in 1955 when Jonas Salk discovered the polio vaccine is when things started to settle down a little. And now the WHO states that polio has been eliminated from many parts of the world. In fact, things like smallpox have been completely eradicated. However, this suffering and burden of disease has not gone from all parts of the world. Think about not just industrialized society, but think about the developing world. And this contrast is even more stark when it comes to the rural-urban divide. The developing areas in the world have some of the most pristine, gorgeous landscapes. I mean, think about the Himalayas, the skiing out there. Think about the Saharan dunes. But think about the constraints and resources. There's barely any access to them. No transport, infrastructure, electricity, access to health and education. And this makes you want to realize and think a little bit more about how do you get access to health to these kids out there. Meet a little young girl out here. Let's call her Charity. Charity grew up in a remote village in Africa. Her parents, of course, adored her, but not just her parents, but the whole village loved her because she was the brightest child in the village. She was the only girl to go to university in town. Her parents got her everything they could. They scraped and saved. They were really challenged resource-wise, but they scraped and saved to get the best of education and health. One day after she went to university, she got really bad fever, and she got muscular paralysis, and she was eventually diagnosed with polio. Her whole village was flabbergasted. How did this happen? This was our dream of the future. She was the one who was going to advance the village forward. What happened? Charity is now back at home with her parents in this remote village, dependent on her old parents. Her mother actually remembers a time that she walked for 3 hours with Charity on her back to this makeshift rural clinic on the outskirts of the town. She had braved 3 hours of walking in the hot sun, and she stood in the hot, dusty line out there. At that time, the healthcare worker came after pedaling for 2 or 3 hours with his ice box full of vaccines. Charity was immunized with the polio dose. She got to drink those drops. She also got the booster drops. Then what happened? People responded. Everybody was there. It was very tough to bring everybody together, but she did get the polio drops. What happened? Well, in hindsight, it is clear now that what Charity got was as good as water. The reason was because the polio drops were not refrigerated in the right temperature range. Vaccines are very, very sensitive biological products which cannot stand exposure to light or to heat, so they have to stay in a very narrow band of 2 to 8 degrees centigrade. So at that time, there was no proper temperature control, and you see this had devastating effects. So it is important to understand that vaccines need to stay thermostable throughout their life. So what does the life of a vaccine look like? It starts off in a vaccine lab, gets refrigerated in state-of-the-art equipment. Then it goes to various countries, either by flight or by road, and you get really good electrical service, and you get refrigeration, and it goes to district depots. It is after this, downstream of this, that the supply chain actually breaks down. There are so many millions of primary healthcare centers all over the world which just don't have electricity, don't have road access. How do you get healthcare out there? People are dependent on kerosene refrigerators, which, number one, are completely unreliable. They break down, they have entrails hanging out, the technicians don't get to it for a year. On the other hand, kerosene and gas has huge fuel operating costs. It is unaffordable. On top of it, at the outreach level, which is the last mile of the cold chain of the vaccine, either the child has to be brought all the way to the healthcare center, or the healthcare staffer has to walk for miles to get the child vaccinated. He has to go, or she has to go, walk through fields and forests, find children, ask them, have you been immunized? No, let's get you a shot. But that's a breakdown of a system. That is why this chain is only as weak, it's only as strong as its weakest link. And currently the weakest link is the last 2 miles, which is the primary healthcare center and the outreach, which is where the cold chain breaks down. Now, the scale of this problem is huge because this means that the vaccines have to go all the way from lab to jab, being completely thermostable. Look at the magnitude of the problem. The WHO says that the causes of under-vaccination in the world is not the affordability of the vaccine. Billions of dollars are pumped into vaccine production, and they're heavily subsidized and they're plentiful. However, even though it takes only $20 with subsidized vaccines to complete the immunization of a child, it takes many magnitudes of order more to actually get the delivery of the vaccine to the child. So that is the crux of the problem. That on one hand, 50% of vaccines are being wasted because they're not being kept in the right temperature zone. On the other hand, 1.5 million children are dying every year because of vaccine-preventable diseases. Now, isn't that a challenge? Isn't that a problem we want to solve? We really think so. Saving lives is important enough, but economically also this makes sense. It is calculated that by making vaccine coverage effective up to 90% can save up to $300 million in healthcare costs. And when we look at increased productivity, it is $17 billion that you can actually have better economic viability. And they say that putting $1 in vaccine can give you $18, up to $18 in benefits economically. So it's not just a health problem, it's an economic problem, it's a global problem. So we looked at all the challenges in the field and we came up with, okay, what are the biggest gaps there are to really create a refrigeration solution for the vaccines? And we started to respond to this call to action by putting together an R&D team and by seeking out partnerships in the field. And the whole crux of our problem solving was around how to get the vaccine in the right place, at the right time, at the right temperature. So think about the first challenge. How do you make a fridge solution that will be working off-grid, where there is either intermittent electricity or no electricity? How do you make sure that it can run on wind or solar solutions? How do you make it in such a way that it can reach the last mile without being heavy? It should be small enough and it should be light enough that a healthcare worker can carry it. How do you make a vaccine refrigeration solution that is not as expensive as the current ones out here? We want to find a solution which is at least 1/3 to 1/4 of the cost of what's happening. It's about $2,500 to about $4,000 in the field, which is completely unacceptable to healthcare facilities. Another big problem is I've actually been to healthcare facilities where I've seen many kerosene fridges lying on shelves of facilities, either broken or waiting for a technician to arrive. So we want something which is robust, which is reliable, which will give you the thermal performance and will also be easy to maintain. And finally, since we're coming from a lab which does sustainable technology, we want to make sure that we add another product to the world, we want to make sure it's green and sustainable. So we chose a technology in which we use only water as a refrigerant, and we use no electrochemical storage, no expensive toxic batteries, and using only solar power. So while I was being excited about the development of our product and doing the design, and we would have all these conversations at home about, across the dinner table, I was talking to my family about this, and my daughter, she's a 7th grader, she said, I love this name, Afia, which is a really cute African name, and we actually looked it up, and it meant health and wellness. And suddenly it dawned on me that this was the perfect name for the vaccination refrigerator family, because AFIA also stands for Adaptable Fridge for Immunization Access. And today I want to show to you a prototype that we developed at the lab. And I'm going to try and tilt it so you can see it. It's got lots of wires. Don't be scared of it. The interesting thing about this is that it looks very different from a regular fridge. It's a chest-style refrigerator where the vaccines are being stored in these compartments at a natural thermal gradient between the outside, which is at about 45 or 50 degrees centigrade, and the inside, which is basically ice at 0 degrees centigrade. So the vaccines need to be stored into 2 to 8 degrees. This is the perfect place to put them. Not above a freezer, not below a freezer, but right next to a freezer. Secondly, what we did was, instead of using compressor technology, we took an idea from laptop cooling technology. As you must have all heard of the Dell laptop, heating up. So there's obviously very interesting technologies being used at very small scales, which can reach temperature differentials. So we use something called thermoelectric technology to actually construct this fridge. And you can actually see the fan of the thermoelectric unit sitting out here. Thirdly, we actually created compartments like this. So you could have really dense packing of trays with the vaccines. And there's no vaccines in here. They're completely empty bottles, so don't be worried about that. And after talking to our partners in the field, we realized that there's many different types of vaccine vials. So our trays are designed for different types of vials. Can you guess how many vials this little chamber holds? Anybody? Sorry? 100? Anybody else? Go north. It's close to 450 vials in this space. So that is kind of the whole idea, is how do you make your campaign in such a way that the healthcare worker can actually use this particular unit, put it into a backpack, charge it up with solar, and go off for 3 days and do a campaign with these without having to worry about, is he going to hurt his back? Is he going to be able to travel with it? Or most importantly, are the vaccines going to be thermostable for the next 3 days or not? So this fridge, once it's charged up by the PV panel, can hold its temperature for up to 5 days. And a backpack using one of those can hold it up to 3 days. So while we're working with our partners, we are realizing that this is something that can actually change the face of immunization. Secondly, to make sure that we have guaranteed thermal performance, we have electronics built into this unit which will draw from these wires, which will be hidden eventually. These are thermistors, which will actually get all the data about the temperatures from all over the fridge and make sure that every 15 minutes, the data is recorded into the electronics. And more importantly, when the healthcare worker comes in the morning, he can see or she can see the entire data from the whole night or the whole day or the 5 days and not be worried about whether the vaccines were stable or not. Also, sitting in a remote location, a text will be sent from this unit to a central station where somebody else can monitor whether that vaccine fridge that is in the field or the backpack, which is in XYZ area, is running correctly or not. So that is the power of electronics we're bringing to this technology, is that we're able to actually guarantee the performance, not just at the site, but at various sites where this will be distributed and deployed. Also, what this allows is actually early warning and alert system, so that a technician who's sitting again in the central site can be alerted that, hey, something may be going wrong with the fridge. Before the vaccines get spoiled, let's get to it and let's get it done. So these are the kind of service level agreements we're actually working out with ministries of health. And with our partners, we're working with the Gavi Alliance, with the WHO, the UNICEF. We're also working with our in-field partners, the Clinton Health Access Initiative, and PATH, to enable us to do widespread field testing before we actually finalize a product. So I'm really excited to say that next month we will actually be sending this off to the UK and Geneva to get this tested for validity by the WHO. Then we're going to start our field trials. And eventually, our goal is that this becomes a tool in a suite of tools which is part of a clinic in a box. So you can actually take healthcare access to places where it's needed. Not have people come to health, but healthcare go to where it's needed. Eventually, what we want to see as impact is lab to jab. Not just the journey of the vaccine from the laboratory to the delivery, but also taking a technology from lab to impact. The jab of impact. The jab of creating happy, healthy faces all over the world and productive and happy families. Thank you.